All right. Thank you for joining us today for a seasonal and hot topic of the year, farmers markets and functional foods. I'm here today with one of our dietitians, Kendra Horn, and guest Paige Gilbert with Headwater Food Hub. And we'll be sharing today who Sweet Pea partners with for some of our produce for all the meals we create for our customers and clients every week. Additionally, we'll touch on some key points related to farmers markets and defining what functional foods include and how to get more. So Sweet Pea's mission is to grow the public's awareness of health benefits of plant-based nutrition and to provide tools to make a plant-based lifestyle attainable for everybody. Our vision is to cut chronic illnesses killing Americans in half. Out of the top 5 leading causes of death, 5 of those are diseases and conditions are all conditions and diseases that can be prevented and even some reversed through whole food plant-based eating. Those 5 diseases and conditions include cardiovascular disease, diabetes, certain types of cancers, stroke, and chronic kidney disease. Our values, we work sustainably. I'll talk more about our partners on the food service side of things in the next slide. Our dietitians do leave a 0 paper trail waste because everything is done electronically. In addition to that, our kitchen does compost and we partner with Impact Earth for that. We value our people, and that includes our customers, vendors, and employees, and we do that by doing the right thing. So our chef, which is Chef Ryan Jennings, he's also one of our co-founders, believes in partnering with New York State farmers, not only to support them, but to also ensure the meals that we produce provide the best and the highest quality nutrients while tasting delicious. To add to one of our values of working sustainably, we also work closely with upstate New York produce suppliers, including Full Moon Farms Organics for seasonal produce, Leap Foods for our mushrooms, and Headwater Food Hub as one of our produce suppliers. So I'd like now to give Paige the mic and allow her to give us a brief introduction on Headwater Food Hub. Welcome, Paige, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jen. I've loved your company ever since you guys opened, so it's a real treat to be included in something like this.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Paige Gilbert. I am the produce merchant at Headwater Food Hub. Basically what that means is I help run the produce team here. So all the buying, all the selling, all the coordination for making sure that we can get awesome New York State produce all across New York State. So Headwater really started with a deep connection to producers and over time has tried to figure out how to get really good quality food to a broader audience. So a lot of times like people are shopping directly at a farmer's market or going through a distributor, and we really wanted to like help bridge some of the gaps that we were noticing across our community. You can go to the next slide. So one of the things that I'm going to talk a little bit about today is how do we connect with farmers and how do we choose really good partners for our business. So here's a little blurb from our website about what we're really interested in and what we value in our business. So we work with a broad cross-section of partners and producers throughout the state. We work with new and beginning farmers that may have only a couple acres, and I have one company in mind that they bring in refugees that are looking to establish some kind of small farm in this area. So they're looking to bring in some of the crops that they used to grow in their old country, and starting from scratch is really hard in the United States. So this company helps build their business. We also work with some of the largest commercial farms in the state. So we really try to welcome anyone and make sure that if they share our values and our vision for a sustainable food system, we want to work with them. So a lot of our farmers that we're currently working with have been partners that we've worked with since we've started, and maybe even before, with some, people in our company's experience in past lives. And we really developed some strong relationships with them as our business has pivoted and shifted. And new producers can always reach out to us, and we'll usually just have a conversation with them and learn about their growing practices and how they treat their employees, their own vision for how they want to grow their business, and just making sure that everything lines up and it sounds like a good fit. We also have really strived to prioritize minority, women-owned, and small businesses. It's something that has definitely been a hot topic in recent years, but it's something that we've prioritized for a while. And we probably work with about 40 to 50 growers, like produce growers, on an annual basis. So it's quite a lot, and it's a diverse collection of different foods and different attributes, small to super large, and it really just encompasses what Newark is all about. There's all kinds of different farms and different communities and different types of people, and we really try to work with that. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Headwater's history. I've been in the company for a little over a year, and learning about the history is just so exciting because it really has shifted so much since we've started. So it really started in 2009 with the Good Food Collective. We used to call it the GFC. And what that was a direct-to-consumer CSA box type program that really aimed to get farmers market quality products to a much wider audience. So we did that for some years, and we started getting requests from restaurants in the Rochester and Ithaca areas. Like, they were really interested in being a part of this really awesome program that we had. And that kind of started our business program, our wholesale market, where we serve a lot of restaurants, some institutions, and more like larger scale, where like a box is just not going to be enough. Then in like 2019, we decided that we wanted to give our customers more choice, because these boxes were curated, and like you just bought a box and that's what you would get. And we wanted to offer them more choice and more freedom. So we started to think about a program called Headwater at Home. And we were planning to launch that in the summer of 2020. And if you remember that timeline, it was the pandemic, and restaurants had to quickly shut down, institutions had to quickly shut down, and people were really nervous about where they were going to get their food. I mean, I'm sure everybody can remember like going to the grocery store and there were like limits to everything that you can get, and it was just a really scary time. So even though we weren't 100% ready to launch our Headwater Home program, we felt like it was a necessity that we did. So we launched that, and basically what that was, it replaced the GFC program, and it was an a la carte system where we would bring in products and you could buy one bunch of this and one bunch of that and a whole bunch of really great grocery and meat items. And I actually came on at the end of the Headwater Home program, and it was super fun. I mean, like for me, like personally, it was a great place for me to shop. It was a great resource to find things that you're not going to find at your grocery store. And it was like a really niche, but really accessible option for so many people. Things have shifted since the pandemic, and we realized that for right now, we are going to focus on other means of our business. So we paused that program. So we are focusing more on our business program and our community program. So to talk a little bit more about the community programs, we have two main segments of that program. We have a farm to school program, which is like a K through 12 program. And then we have a program more towards food banks and food pantries. So Headwater has been involved with farm to school efforts for quite some time, and it really started to build up in 2019 when New York adopted the No Child Go Hungry initiative, which was the 30% initiative. And what that was if a K through 12 school district could spend 30% or more on lunch programs and that were sourced in New York State, they could get a much larger percentage back from the state. So normally you could get like about 6 cents, and with this program you get 24 cents. So it was significant, and a lot of schools decided that they were going to invest in having somebody organize the K through 12 farm to school program. And with that, there were more schools opening up bid programs that so if you don't know what a bid program is, it's when a school puts together their entire year's menu and they put how many things they're going to need for a particular month. And then they send out that bid to distributors and food hubs and other companies. And these companies figure out what that is going to cost in the next year, which is very hard to do, especially now. And you submit the bid and the school goes through and they figure out what's going to work best for them. Usually it's the lowest priced item, but they also do other things like factor in if you have an organic product or a woman minority owned farm. So it's developed in a way where even though you might have something a little bit more expensive, you can take a little bit more priority in it if you're sourcing from something that has a little bit more value. So that's kind of like where we shine, because we do work with so many farms and we do work with so many different types of farms. So we have had the pleasure of winning many bids. So we are definitely involved in the K through 12 program throughout the state. And you'll see later on in this presentation, as time has gone on, the K through 12 program in New York State has grown, and more people are doing it, and more little kids are eating some really great New York State products. And partially that's because of what we're doing, and also like what other organizations in the state are doing. So that's a really great program that I'm really happy that Headwater has the chance to work in. And then on the flip side of the community programs, so when the pandemic hit, there was a real need to find a new market for stuff farmers were growing, because restaurants were shut down and it was just a really complex time. So the state came up with this funding stream called Nourish New York. And what that was doing was it was using the same reporting structure that the K through 12 schools were going through. And it was allowing food banks and food pantries to get an allotment of money that they could spend on New York State products. So that's been a huge part of our business in the last couple of years. And what we've been doing is a couple different things. Like some of what we do is just full pallets of produce or dairy or meat products. But we also curate boxes. So we have like a produce box, a dairy box, and a mixed box. And food banks and food pantries use those Nourish New York dollars to buy these boxes that we curate, that we source, that we pack, and then we send it to them, and then they distribute it to their community. And we do this all across New York State. We have a lot of people in New York City that use this. I mean, you think about the need there, the population there, but there's also some that are really close to home. And like we work with FoodLink, which is like right in our backyard, and we work with a place in Western New York, Buffalo area. So it's definitely like something that's growing. This funding stream continues to get discussed and worked through, but it sounds like it is here to stay, at least for the near future, which is great. And what's great about it is, you know, we're buying tons and tons of produce from farms in our area that it really helps them be sustainable and move through a ton of their product. And it also is just giving people that are, in struggling times, like some really good food. And that's what we love to do. We love to get our good food accessible across the state. So I think that's it for the history. I think we can move on to the next one. Oh, great question. So what's the difference between integrated pest management, or IPM, and organic? So the real difference, so there's three main attributes. There's conventionally grown produce, there's IPM, and organic. And the real difference between integrated pest management and organic is how it is regulated. So USDA organic is regulated by USDA, and there's like other smaller branches within. And production practices such as soil management, crop rotation, seed selection, pest management, how things are harvested, labeled, handled, all of that is really strictly regulated by the USDA. And there's only a certain number of things that you can buy. There's only a certain number of things that you can, the ways that you can grow something. And like, for example, pesticides and fertilizers are only approved and made from natural materials. So it's pretty strict. But with that really strict criteria, you are allowed to label and sticker your produce as organic. So, and most people nowadays know that, like you can go to the grocery store and things are labeled really clearly. If it's not labeled, you kind of assume that it's conventional, but there is this like gray area in the middle. So that's where IPM comes in. And really what IPM is about is it's a means to solve pest problems by using our knowledge about pests to prevent them from damaging crops or animals or your infrastructure. And it's always trying to use the most effective, least risk option. So instead of applying pesticides, like, every year on the third week of May, like, you're doing it as needed. So that's the difference between like a conventional and an IPM. Pesticides are always the last resort, and farmers always want to do it if it's going to keep the crop damage below their economic levels. So they're allowed to use pesticides, fertilizers, and other materials made from synthetic materials when necessary. And that's really key. Like with organic, like you can only use natural materials, where IPM, there's a little bit more leeway, but that leeway kind of gives you the freedom to choose like when you really need to use it to save your crop versus can you do something else to still get the crop you want, but do it in a very safe way. So these practices for IPM are not regulated by the government. They're regulated by, they're not regulated, they're developed by researchers. And like Cornell is a big institution that works with IPM. And within IPM, within the umbrella, there are certifications that you can get. So unlike organic, you're not going to see something at the grocery store labeled IPM, which is kind of confusing because like the only way you can really know for sure is if you know the farm, you know their growing practices. And that's why it's really important to shop local, because when you know the farm and how they work and how they treat their land, then you can understand their practice, their attribute. But there are things that in the IPM industry is moving towards to get people a little bit more involved in understanding what this practice is and why it's so important. So there's this certification called Eco Apple, and it is a Northeast tree fruit organization, and it is looking to, I'm sorry, it's a little bit noisy, there's a lot of warehouse work going And it's looking to really find some strong IPM practices for tree fruit, like apples, in this area. And it's specific to the Northeast because I'm sure a lot of you know there are things that grow really, really well in New York in the Northeast compared to California. So these practices are aimed to get farmers really comfortable with working with pests and working with other troublesome parts in growing apples, for example. Another thing to note is the reason why some people don't move towards certified organic is because not every crop grows really well in every area. So if you want to grow something here that maybe doesn't naturally grow here, or maybe is just really hard to get certified organic here, IPM is that really good middle ground. So you can still get the benefits of organic-like practices, but you're not going to have the label. So this is why this eco apple is really fun and really encouraging for this industry. And actually, we are working with Herd Orchards, which is one of our really strong apple partners. And she is actively working on getting her eco apple certification. Last year, she was super close. And this year, her audit is probably somewhere in like the summer, somewhere in like July, and we're hoping that she can get certified so that way her apples are going to be eco apple approved. So with that said, you're not going to see a sticker on your apples that says IPM anytime soon. I mean, who knows, maybe that will be something that we see in the upcoming years, but this is why it's just really important to know who's growing your food, how they're growing your food, and this difference between organic, conventional, and then this like other gray area that not a lot of people know about, but maybe if more people did, we could get really comfortable with supporting the farms that do this. Any questions on that?
No, that was really helpful and insightful information. I'm very excited about the eco, is it eco apple?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very exciting. So thanks so much for sharing that. That's a very common question that we get from our clients when they're going to the grocery store and shopping. So, we as dietitians do encourage our clients to shop as closely to where their food is grown as much as possible. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So on this next slide, we know that the farm to table concept has evolved over the decades since the 1960s. And as our society becomes more health conscious and knowledgeable about our food supply, that's going to directly impact how we get our food and how it's grown. On this chart, we see here that since 2007, there's been a growth exponentially around farmers markets, regional food hubs. So thank you, Headwater, and school districts. Farmers markets have grown by 180%, regional food hubs by 288%, and look at our school district participation, 430%. Prior to starting with Sweet Pea, I actually worked at Victor Central School District for about a year, and I do recall that time when we were getting ready to partner with Headwater, and just the thought of having local produce on the table for our K through 12, that's so rewarding because the education on food and nutrition can be so impactful for the K through 12 demographic, and that will carry on and develop throughout their adulthood. So if we can get the message out sooner, it's better overall for our society's health. So this is a really great chart, and I hope that there's going to be some new and updated research done to see where the growth is at now. So let's shift gears and let's talk about the benefits of shopping at a farmer's market or finding a local farm stand to shop at on the side of the road. The idea of shopping closer to where our food is grown is really to cut out the middleman. In other words, reducing the amount of time spent from when food is harvested and purchased or eaten by you, the consumer. Buying local and reducing that food transportation also reduces our carbon footprint. The food that's coming from other countries They do have to travel via large ships. These large shipping containers then must sit at the port until they're unpacked or packed onto planes and trucks to be distributed to their location. The grocers then get their weekly shipments, and then those are now stocked on the shelves. And so you can see that throughout the time that the food is in transportation, nutrients are also being diminished during that time. So it is a lot better. So when you look at shopping at a farmer's market or at a local CSA, this is where produce time is likely to travel less than 50 miles versus conventionally grown produce that travels maybe 1,500 miles and was picked 14 days or 2 weeks prior to it being on your dinner table. So we're so fortunate in many parts of the country to be surrounded by farmland, especially in upstate New York. And I'm originally from California, so produce was abundant there too. And, there are many farm stands around. So as you're driving around this summer, stop by a farm stand and pick up some produce to bring home. And we'll talk about some other benefits here. So other benefits of shopping at a farmer's market, Paige will talk about more about a CSA. So other reasons, we're looking for peak season of produce. And what this does is it also increases nutrient availability. Like I had mentioned before, when food is transported, it does lose nutrients over time. Produce that's picked before its ripeness in order to travel loses about 45% of its nutritional content by the time it reaches the store shelves. Produce that also ripens naturally is higher in nutrients and phytochemicals, which Kendra and I will go over functional foods and phytochemicals in the second part of this presentation. Another reason is that peak produce tastes differently. So there's much more flavor. Fruits and vegetables that are, again, allowed to ripen naturally will have more flavor. There's also a lot more variety. Customers can learn what produce is unique to where they live, and they can really eat based off of what's available each season. They'll start to learn and play around with different foods that they may not see. I personally love shopping at a farmer's market because there are so many colors that you see compared to shopping in the grocery store, and there are so many varieties of different vegetables and fruits that you really don't get to see in the grocery store. And then, of course, supporting local community. According to a study that was done through Utah State University, buying local keeps 65% of dollars in the community, whereas buying at large chain grocery stores keeps only 40% of dollars in the community. So we are supporting our local farmers and our generations to come to keep our soils going and to keep produce growing and food on the table. So my final question to Paige is, how can we support local farmers in the area?
Yeah, great question. I think the way you want to think about it is think about what your food dollars mean. So we all need to eat, we all need to sustain ourselves with good food, and how you spend that money is really going to influence your community. So that's why supporting small businesses is really important. And there's been a strong push to go down that route in the past few years with the pandemic. And it's the same thing with your food dollars. So you can do a couple things. One, you can join a CSA. So a CSA is a community supported agriculture. And what usually this means is in early, maybe late winter, very early spring, you're paying a lump sum amount to a specific farm. And the reason you're doing this is because there's a lot of inputs that farmers need to pay at the beginning and during their season. Like they have to buy all the seeds and the soil and the compost, and that is a lot of money. So what you're doing is you're paying the farmer up front and you're saying, I want to support you, I want to support your farm, I want to support the fact that you're going to feed me later. And then during the peak produce season, when they're producing a ton of stuff, you're taking a share of that. So it could mean something like going to a farmer's market and getting a box or picking up at the farm. And it's just a way to have a really symbiotic relationship where you're giving the farmer upfront resources so that you can reap the really great benefits in the middle of the season. And oftentimes, like, what it sounds like a lot of money if the share is $200 or $300, but oftentimes if you were to buy those ingredients at an individual unit cost, you are actually paying significantly less. So if you have the means to pay a little bit more upfront, you are going to seriously reap the benefits later on. And also oftentimes the CSA shares are like their best items and the stuff they're really, really excited about. So it's a really great way to eat foods that are really, really ripe and really great, in the timeline of the plant's life. And it could be something where you're introducing a product that you've never tried before, that maybe you've been intimidated to try, and now you have it in your box, you have it in your bag, and you're sort of forced to use it and experiment with something that you probably wouldn't have tried before. So that's a really great way to support our local farmers. And it's something that I do. It's something that I'm always super excited in the dead of winter to get that email saying, sign up for your CSA, because thinking about summer produce in Western New York in in cold, dreary winter months is super exciting, and thinking about the recipes you can try and the really great fruits and vegetables that you can eat. If you can't do that because maybe it's too late in the season, or you don't have the means to do that, you can always visit your farmer's market. I go to one in Brighton every single Sunday, and it's a beautiful market. It has a whole bunch of different types of producers, and it has, a bread place and food trucks, and it's a really fun community to shop at. So this is a place where you can interact directly with your farmer, which I love. I love stopping and talking to the farmer and seeing what's going on at their farm, how they're doing, what great new products they have. And again, it's a great time to talk to them about attributes, what their growing practices are, what they value, what they prioritize. And then being able to see the produce right in front of you, you can know, like, this is what a tomato should look like and smell like and feel like, compared to a grocery store tomato that might have been picked very underripe and gassed in order to get ripe. And you can really sense the difference in your food quality and really the taste. Like Jen mentioned before, when you allow vegetables and fruits to ripen the way they're supposed to, that flavor is really, really strong. So those are two really great options to learn more about food and learn more about your local farming community. But there's also another side to it. There's the policy side. So one really great way to support our farmers is to get involved in our legislature and making sure that we're allowing our representatives to prioritize agriculture in New York State. So there's a couple of different things that you could do. You can join organizations like NOFA, which is the National Organization, or the National Organic Farming Association of New York. And it's a nonprofit that provides programs and services that support sustainable local organic food and farming. So if it's something that you're interested in, you can sign up and you can get involved in discussions that they're having. And it's a really great way to stay involved on like the other side of like the eating, not just eating great food and buying great food, but like supporting the organizations that are going to help farmers stay really active and involved in this state. And I'm going to lastly leave with this like really cute catchphrase from one of our farms called Juniper Hill Farm in the Adirondacks. And Jen, I know you are from California, and that's super exciting, and I'm so jealous. And I'm not saying that California is bad. I'm just saying that it's really important to support our community, and our community is like New York State. So Juniper Hill has this little catchphrase they use, and they say, don't let California feed New York. So much of our food comes from California, shipped in across the country, and we don't want that to be the case. We want to prioritize New York State, and when we can't get our citrus and our avocados, we can let that come in shipped. But for the most part, we want to do everything we can to support New York agriculture, New York communities, and New York farmers.
Thanks so much, Paige. That's so funny because I have seen that.
It's so good. I love it.
It is. And you know, I just wanted to say something about the CSA too for people to consider the cost, because you know, if you've tried planting your own produce at home, it takes a lot of work to you know, to make sure the soil's correct, to make sure that the harvest is grown correct. I mean, I was growing tomatoes and my tomatoes grew everywhere. And I think if you were to learn and understand the science behind it, you'll have a better appreciation for what these farmers do. So I think it's definitely very cost effective. And just the idea of, oh, I have a little plot on this farmer's land and they're going to take care of it for me. That's such a wonderful thought to have, in a service that I would definitely pay for and support wholeheartedly. So thank you so much, Paige, for your time and for your expertise and for your information. I know this is all information that's going to greatly benefit our customers, clients, and our vast audience. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, so now we're going to shift gears and we're going to move into our second portion of the presentation for today's webinar, and that's going to be on the topic of functional foods. So before we get started, I'm going to have Kendra go ahead and introduce herself, and I will introduce myself after.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kendra Horn. I'm a registered dietitian and certified health education specialist. I completed my undergraduate degrees at Miami University in Ohio. I completed my my dietetic internship through Oklahoma State University and my master's degree from the University of Alabama. I've actually been a dietitian for 15 years. I've worked in hospitals and nursing homes and community nutrition through cooperative extension, and I have taught at colleges and universities nutrition courses. I currently teach for the University of Maryland's global campus, and then I've been with Sweet Pea for 2 years next month. I myself have been on a plant-based diet for 11 years. Prior to that, I was a lacto-ovo vegetarian, but my parents actually went plant-based before I did, and they got me to read a copy of the China study, and then I became plant-based too. And I've really enjoyed working with clients one-on-one. Part of the reason that I wanted to work with clients one-on-one was because I had learned about intuitive eating and became a certified intuitive eating counselor, so that I can work with clients to help them heal their relationship with food and become more attuned with their bodies, and using that as their guidance for eating, while also using gentle nutrition and whole food plant-based eating. So I'm excited to be here and to teach you all.
Thanks, Kendra. And my name is Jen Nguyen. I'm Director of Nutrition at Sweet Pea Plant-Based Kitchen. I've been with the company for a little over 3 years, so just a year before Kendra, and I completed my undergrad in nutrition and dietetics from Cal State Long Beach. And shortly after that, completed my dietetic internship at Cornell University. Prior to joining the Sweet Pea team, I actually was a school dietitian at Victor Central School District and was a part of the wellness committee there, and got then recruited to work for Sweet Pea. And after joining the Sweet Pea team, I completed the plant-based nutrition certificate program through the Center for Nutrition Studies. Growing up, I ate several vegan meals a month for religious reasons, and plants were and still a huge part of my life growing up, as well as other foods too. And my journey to being whole food plant-based is ongoing, and I primarily eat plant-based for environmental and health reasons. And my certified personal training certification came before I became a dietitian. I was a personal trainer and also fitness coach for various gyms in California, and then also in upstate New York as well. And I have enjoyed working with clients and seeing them transform their health and their life and gain back more energy and more time in switching over to a plant-based. So I'm also very excited to share with you why we encourage and recommend plant-based eating and whole food plant-based eating for a lot of our clients and how they've made their shift. So let's move into the presentation and talk just briefly about what whole food plant-based is. So the purpose to shifting to whole food plant-based is really to reduce or avoid the amount of animal products that we're consuming and highly processed foods that we consume. By decreasing the amount of highly processed foods and also animal products, is that we are reducing our risk of nutrition-related diseases such as heart disease, stroke, certain types of cancers, diabetes, and chronic kidney disease. In the past 3 years, new studies and more research are showing that the increased consumption of highly processed foods is linked to increased mortality and poor health outcomes. What we do know is that by reducing your intake of these ultra-processed or highly processed foods is that you can decrease your risk of some of these diseases and decrease your risk of mortality. So when we're focused on eating whole and plant-based foods, we're including an abundance of vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals, which is what we're going to talk about today. When you look at the foods that are included versus excluded, there's a much larger variety of food combinations that you can have. And again, the growing season is among us, where food is abundant in a lot of regions across the country, thus increasing the amount of nutrients we get. We can also increase the taste and also be environmentally conscious with our decisions. So when you're looking at what whole food plant-based includes, you see that there's a large list here of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, and then minimally processed foods. And then on the excluded list, it's your meat products, eggs, dairy, seafood, and highly processed foods, including oils. So I'm going to shift gears and let Kendra talk about phytochemicals now.
All right, so for those of you who aren't familiar with this term, since it contains chemicals, it might be kind of alarming to you, but these are good chemicals that occur in plants. We only find phytochemicals in plants, and it's one of the reasons that we think a whole food plant-based diet is so effective at reducing our risk for chronic diseases, including cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, dementia, cancer, inflammatory bowel diseases, and even reducing our risk for developing obesity and aiding in anti-aging. And we know that there is an inverse relationship between chronic diseases and our fruit and veggie intakes, meaning that the more fruits and veggies and plants that we consume, the less risk for disease, the risk that we have. All right, so let's look at some of these different definitions that we want to be sure to cover. The first one is functional foods. These are foods that are superfoods. It's what you'll see in the headlines on social media. Eat this food to prevent XYZ. Cure all for all these different things. But functional foods are foods that have a potentially positive effect on health beyond basic nutrition. So they go above and beyond just providing us with calories and vitamins and minerals. They serve the body even more. Phytochemicals, which we'll talk about in a lot more detail, are biologically active compounds that we find only in plants. And some phytochemicals act as antioxidants, which play a really important role in reducing oxidative stress because antioxidants, they're a substance that inhibit oxidation. So let's talk more about functional foods and the different types. So the first functional food category are conventional foods. So these are foods that haven't been changed or altered in any way. They're unmodified. And the best example of a conventional food that's also a functional food that I can think of is oats. Oats, of course, are going to provide us with that basic nutrition, but they also provide us with soluble fiber, and soluble fiber goes above and beyond because it helps to block the absorption of cholesterol into our bloodstream, and therefore lowers our risk for heart disease and for stroke. The next category of functional foods are modified foods. These are foods that have been changed in some way to boost their nutritional benefit. An example of this is orange juice that has calcium added to it. We add that calcium to boost our calcium intake to reduce our risk for osteoporosis down the road. And then the last category of functional food would be like a food ingredient. So this is extracting a certain ingredient from a food to be able to get the more of the benefit that that ingredient provides. An example of this are phytosterols. Phytosterols are part of a plant's cellular membrane. Their structure is very similar to cholesterol. So when we consume phytosterols, they compete with cholesterol to be absorbed. And when the phytosterol is absorbed instead of the cholesterol, our blood cholesterol levels come down. And so you'll find phytosterols added to things like margarines and things like that. But we get that benefit though too when we eat plants. All right, so phytochemicals, these are everything the plants have that you want. And it's important to note that we're saying plants, we're not saying supplements here, because we want to be sure that we're eating plants in their whole form. We're still learning a lot about what's in the food that we eat. So we want to be sure that we're eating foods to get the nutritional benefit as opposed to relying on supplements. And Jen's going to talk more about that later. But the role of phytochemicals in our body is really important for reducing our risk for all these different diseases and helping to slow down aging and prevent obesity. Okay, so phytochemicals, like I said, they're not a scary thing. They're actually part of the plant's immune system. And when we eat a phytochemical, we get the benefit of the plant's immune system. It helps to bolster our own immune systems. And the way that a plant becomes higher in phytochemicals is due to the environmental stressors that are placed on that plant while it's growing. A good example of this is a red leafy lettuce versus iceberg lettuce. A red leafy lettuce, most of the leaves of the lettuce are going to be exposed to the sun. And so they have to protect themselves against the radiation from the sun. They have to protect themselves against the bugs and other critters. So they want to make themselves taste a little bit less tasty. Whereas the iceberg lettuce grows in a ball. Only the outer leaves are going to be exposed to the sun and those critters. When we harvest the iceberg lettuce, we rip off those outer leaves and then we bring it home and we rip off the next layer of leaves. And so what we're left with isn't going to be very high in terms of phytochemical content, because those leaves haven't had to, excuse me, create a lot of phytochemicals to be able to fight off radiation and things like that, because they haven't needed to. There are over 10,000 phytochemicals that have been discovered so far. And I say so far because nutrition is still a relatively young science, and we don't know exactly all of the mechanisms that phytochemicals utilize to reduce our risk for disease, which is why it's so important, again, that we get these phytochemicals from whole foods as opposed to supplements, because we think that the phytochemicals kind of work synergistically with one another to be able to reduce our risk for disease. So we can't really replicate that in a supplement form. Flavonoids make up the largest class of phytochemicals. There are over 6,000 that have been identified. We find them in citrus fruits, apples, onions, dark chocolate, tea, coffee, fava beans, soybeans, and berries. They help to reduce our risk for diseases like coronary heart disease, stroke, hypertension, cancer, and other diseases that we're still studying. We want to increase our intake of phytochemicals by really focusing on eating a large variety of plants so that we can have the most exposure to all these different phytochemicals. We also want to focus on consuming fruits and veggies, excuse me, that are really nice and brightly colored. If you think about like a gala apple, for instance, they can kind of range in color. A lot of times they can be kind of mottled, but as the apple is growing on a tree, if it's exposed to the sun, it has to develop more of that red pigment. Well, that red pigment is a phytochemical. So the more red the gala apple is, the more phytochemicals it has. We also want to focus in on fruits and veggies that are maybe a little bit more bitter, a little bit more pungent and peppery, because again, those are the phytochemicals that are present. If you think about a really pungent white onion or yellow onion versus a sweet onion, the difference again is because of the phytochemicals. We also want to think about trying to utilize local produce as much as possible, like we talked about earlier in the presentation, because a lot of the nutritional benefits are lost after harvesting. So broccoli, for instance, within 24 hours of being harvested, has lost a lot of its cancer fighting capabilities. And so we want to try to use locally grown produce or grow our own produce so that we can really take advantage of the phytochemicals that are present. And then last, I want to talk about antioxidants. So I mentioned before that we think a lot of disease states are related to oxidative stress on the body. And antioxidants work by neutralizing free radicals. Free radicals occur because of just normal metabolic processes in the body, but also from pollutants in the environment, like cigarette smoke, air pollution, being exposed to chemicals. And those antioxidants will help to eliminate those so that we don't have that oxidative stress building up in our body and contributing to disease and aging. There are a lot of nutrients that contain antioxidants. So the flavonoids, phenols, polyphenols, and phytoestrogens are all antioxidants, but there are vitamins like beta carotene, vitamin C and E that all act as antioxidants, as well as minerals, selenium and manganese also act as antioxidants in and of themselves. And now Jen is going to talk to you again about the importance of trying to rely on whole foods versus supplements for getting those phytochemicals.
Yes, and this is a huge misconception because, again, the supplement industry is a billion-dollar industry, and if there's new research on a supplement showing benefits to prevent a certain disease or heal or provide some sort of healing factor, there's a supplement on the market for it. But it's important to understand that consuming whole foods is preferred and the best way we get phytochemicals into our bodies, because supplements and whole foods are created differently. For example, there is research that shows that having combinations of various phytochemicals do work synergistically together and will have stronger protective actions versus single isolated phytochemical compounds. In the same study, that study also showed that supplements that contain the single compounds don't have consistent health outcomes. So if you've watched our webinar on dietary supplements, the safety and efficacy of many supplements on the markets still need to be researched to prove that the long-term consumption is safe. And as Kendra mentioned, one of the main functions of phytochemicals include antioxidant compounds to reduce the oxidative stress that we receive from our surroundings. So one of the major functions is, again, antioxidant effects. So with all antioxidant compounds, once they've carried out their function, they become oxidizing compounds themselves. While it's difficult to get an abundance or an excessive amounts of antioxidants from the diet, large doses of antioxidants found in supplements have shown to be potentially harmful. So again, focusing more on the whole foods versus the dietary supplements, and we're going to reiterate that in our summary here. So I'm going to start from the bottom here. So using the food first philosophy again, focusing more on the whole foods. Know that functional foods include whole foods and that they can work synergistically together to provide benefits to prevent disease, boost your body's immune system, cardiovascular system, endocrine, and nervous system. And then the final and most important point that we want to make here as well is that supporting local farmers not only helps farmers, but also benefits your body nutritionally through consuming whole foods, because again, we're reducing that transportation time from the time that the food is harvested, and also increasing the taste of the food. In addition to that, we're also supporting our local community through putting local dollars back into the area that you live in. So with that, if you have any other questions, comments, feedback for us, if you'd like to hear about a topic that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to us and email us if you have any questions or would like to talk more about this topic. We would love to hear from you. Again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Kendra, and I was joined here today with Kendra, and here's our email address and our contact information. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.